Hello, welcome back. So now we are in the parallel track panel sessions. This is security panel. So today's topic is that we are going to talk about how has the borderless world changed the perspective of security. And with me, I have panelist Abhijit Ghosh, who is co-founder and CTO of Confluera. Pravin Madhani, he's co-founder and CEO of K2 Cybersecurity. Susmita Nayak, she's head of product digital security solutions at Plume. A little bit more about our panelist. So Pravin is a successful entrepreneur. He was, before starting K2 Cybersecurity, he was general manager at IC Implementation Division of Mentor Graphics. He joined Mentor through acquisition of Sierra Design Automation, where he was founder, president, and CEO. Prior to Sierra, Pravin was founder, president, CEO of Everest Design Automation, which was acquired by Synopsys. Pravin received his master's in computer engineering from University of Texas in Austin and bachelor's in electrical engineering from IIT Mumbai. Pravin is also advisory board of ECE department at UT Austin. Welcome, Pravin.
Thank you. Thank you, Nidhi.
Abhijit Ghosh. Abhijit Ghosh is CEO, CTO, and co-founder at Confluera, a cybersecurity startup transforming cloud infrastructure protection by delivering autonomous threat storyboarding to accurately uncover attack in progress and mitigate threat in real time. Before starting Confluera, he had engineering leadership positions at Juniper Networks. Abhijit has multiple patents in the area of computer networking and security. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering from IIT Kharagpur and a master's in computer engineering from University of Cincinnati. Welcome, Abhijit.
Hello, Nidhi, and hello, everyone.
Susmita is the head of product manager of digital cybersecurity at Plume, the creator of one of the most widely deployed intelligent platforms for smart homes and small business services. Her expertise span across firmware, cloud, ML, AI, apps, big data, IoT devices. Previous to Plume, Susmita served as head of product and design at McAfee Consumer Innovation, helping to create new security and privacy business outside of computer AV software. Previous to that, she held senior management position at Intel Software Group, where she spearheaded multiple new software business solutions in the area of data center and cloud management using Intel Silicon and firmware advancement. Susmita has a bachelor's degree of computer science and engineering from IIT Kharagpur and an MBA from Santa Clara University. Welcome, Susmita.
Hi, nice to meet all of you.
All right, great to have you on the panel. So today, since as I mentioned before that we are talking about borderless world and how it has affected every single segment of our society today. So whether you are a founder, whether you are an investor, whether you are a corporate leader, whether you're an employee or just a user of a device, security matters to you. So the goal of this panel is to make sure that we put security in perspective for you. So I will get started with my question and I will have our panelists add their thoughts on that. Any initial thought from any of the panelists before I dive straight into questions?
I hope the audience is as excited as us, as we discuss this key topic that is front and center in everyone's minds. So,
Looking forward to a great conversation.
That's great.
And we'll request if there are any questions, please keep it interactive. Let's just bring it on early on, right? So we'll try to address them basically.
Exactly. So great. So let's start our conversation. The first question is, Abhijit, I'll start with you. How do you think the current cybersecurity landscape evolved in last few years? Both from, I'll ask your perspective on enterprise angle, and then Pravin, you could go after that to add your perspective as well. So let's start with the enterprise angle on this.
So if you think about the last few years particularly, right, I mean, there are some mega trends which has impacted everyone dramatically, right? So the attack surface around enterprise assets, which was already very complex and exposed, has gotten further stressed by the remote workforce, right? So folks are accessing assets from their homes, insecure environments, insecure devices. So that has compounded on the attack surface that needs to be protected. The other thing is that the attacks have become sophisticated and these techniques have become more commoditized. Right? Things that could have been done by nation state actors, they are commonly available. And the third thing that I would point out is the cloud adoption, right? So for the agility, for the efficiency, enterprises have moved to that, and this is a continuous journey that's in progress. But along with that comes its own challenges, right? So there is a shared security model around cloud protection. There are assets, modern architectures which need to be protected. So with all of that, the key challenge for the enterprises have become that how do you protect your critical data and applications and customer data from such threats, right? And from the news that we hear almost every day, we know that they're not able to do it very well, right? I mean, there is ransomware attacks, persistent attacks, which are commonly happening all the time. So if you think about it, in each of these cases, the attacker is there in the network for a long time. And this points to a critical challenge that teams face today, right? The attacker being in the environment for months and not being able to find that out with the existing tools and practices is a big challenge. So this points to an imperative for the security industry today to come out with innovative solutions and for the operators to adopt a mindset so that they can address these key challenges and mitigate these threats as soon as possible.
Absolutely agree with you. Pravin, you'd like to add to that from enterprise angle?
Yeah, sure. So think about it. In the last 15 years, cybersecurity has moved from an afterthought to really the forefront in most enterprises. Right? It's one of the agenda topic in boardrooms, and it's also on the top of the mind of a lot of investors. Just let's put at the end of the day, you have to always say, okay, where is the dollars, right? To give you some idea, market 10 years back in cybersecurity was $20 billion. Today, it's at $200 billion. A lot of the people who are probably attending this, many of them are entrepreneurs, right? Or budding entrepreneurs. Venture funding 10 years back in cybersecurity was close to 800 million a year. Today, it's at 10 billion a year. So clearly, cybersecurity is in forefront everywhere. And why is that? Because first, it's been democratized, right? Everyone in the enterprise has been aware of, everybody in the world has been made aware of, right? But also it has been weaponized. It is where the new war is being fought. Recently you may have read this just this week, Wall Street Journal reported that the Russian group which hacked, the SolarWinds have already used the SolarWind attack to go after 140 technology companies. So we're not talking of colonial pipelines here, which may not have the best security programs out there. Even the technology companies which are at the forefront are being hacked, right? In fact, President Biden actually issued an executive order to make cybersecurity, improve the state's national cybersecurity and increase the protection. So clearly, cybersecurity now is a new industry. In fact, all of last year, there were 1,100 ransomware attacks. In 2021, in the first 6 months, there were 1,100 ransomware attacks. So, and the reason is clear, right? You must have read in Colonial Pipeline, they had to give away $5 million worth of Bitcoins. And since I mentioned 5 billion, just to give you some other thing, I don't know how many of you guys are following the DeFi networks. Polygraph lost $600 million this year on a cyber attack. And a few years back, Mt. Gox had actually lost 85,000 Bitcoins to cyber attacks, had to file bankruptcy. That 85,000 Bitcoins are today worth $50 billion.
True.
So given this, clearly cybersecurity is extremely important for the enterprises, and we can go into the details of what the enterprises are doing and what is the industry doing to really help the enterprises. We'll get to that.
Yeah, correct. So that is the enterprise angle, and I think there's some audio issue here. We hope that is being taken care of. So that is the enterprise angle. Susmita, what do you think has changed from the consumer angle as well? Because we're not just employees, we are also people who are using multiple devices. So what do you think how the problem statement or landscape has changed?
Yeah, it's an interesting, question. There's a lot. I mean, the consumer security up until a few years ago wasn't much. It was pretty much about each of us had like a laptop or two, and we needed some antivirus to protect our data, or but what has changed is, with Moore's law, the compute has become cheap, not just in the cloud. Device proliferation is at its peak. I think all of us have three, four devices. The average US device count in the smart home is about 30 plus, depending on who you are as a consumer. We all love our IoT devices. That was not a thing a few years ago. But we all love our devices, enriching our lifestyles in the home. And the home has become like a mini enterprise of sorts. So, when people talk about enterprise security, and there's a CISO there, there's an IT there, there's billions of dollars being spent there. But when you think about the little home that you and I sit in with all of our families and kids and minors and elderly, these attacks, as Abhijit and team have mentioned, are getting very sophisticated. And the average consumer has no defense. And so it's quite a war at large. And I think a lot of people don't understand what they have at stake. I think people even now come and ask me, like, how does it matter if there is like a system breached in my home? So what if a thermostat got breached? So what? Like, what do I have to lose? And I think people don't realize that it's almost like, I think the way to think about it is, acknowledge that there is a stranger in the home, obviously with malicious intent. You wouldn't have a friend in your home without your knowledge. Forget about a stranger like that. And second, what do you have to lose? I mean, well, what about the data? What about your credentials? What about your identity? What about the identity of your kids or other family members? There's a lot at stake. And people also ask, well, I don't know that I'm under attack. How do I know I'm under attack? Well, you won't know, because when people talk about ransomware attacks or phishing attacks, somehow people think these are enterprises getting attacked, not me, not you. Whereas every day you probably are getting some emails that you're protected by Gmail, but there's a lot that actually still creeps out of those defenses, because we use a lot of different systems and apps. So a lot of people don't understand that it's very sophisticated. You are under attack. You should know more about how to protect your home and your families.
Makes sense. Thank you. So now let's take it from the perspective of user, someone who is actually building a company or a product, right? So let me ask this. For example, I'm a founder who is building a startup. What aspect of security I should be aware of, and what are the risks if I don't consider that? Abhijit, would you like to add your thoughts on that?
Sure. So one of the first things would be that you have to be cloud aware, right? So most likely, as you are building your product, your technologies, you are a cloud user. You're using cloud services. You're providing services from there. So you have to understand the paradigm there, right? There is a shared security model. There are modern architectures being used there, API-based services. So all of that brings a degree of shift from a security point of view, and you have to be aware of that. The next thing would be compliance, right? So compliance is very important if you are building a product, whether it is B2B or B2C. Today it is pretty much table stakes, right? To have any conversation which can be taken forward, you have to come with compliance in your pocket. The next thing would be, the practices that you have in your environment, in your engineering, right? So to institute good engineering practices around security, right? To make sure your development is clean, make sure you have a incident management policy. If something happens, right? Roles, responsibilities are clearly defined. So what happens usually is that these kind of things gets pushed out. It's really hard to bring these things later on. So as you are starting building your product and your company, ensuring that the product is secure, make sure that you are being responsible to your customers. So all that is very important. It's really hard as you want to kind of bring your product into the market and go for a sale, but these things have to be taken care of. It is pretty much table stakes now.
Makes sense. So Pravin, you have built few companies. What is your thought on that? Why do you think security is important and what are the risks if you don't do that?
Yeah, Nidhi, great you pointed out. My first startup I started in 97. At that time, we didn't even worry about security. In fact, my running joke in the company was when people used to tell me, hey, what if our code gets stolen? And I used to tell them, like, please put it on your front page that if it gets stolen, please, if there's any bugs, fix it and send it back the files to us. You know what I'm saying, right? So we were taking security that lightly, basically, because we said, who's going to come and steal us, right? Now, I'm running a security company and actually in application development security, and I'll tell you some stories. It's amazing how you cannot even think as a founder not to start with the security, to start with, right? So I always, I'm also investor in many angel investor in many startups, and I always tell the entrepreneurs you have to quickly first define who you're selling to. Are you a B2B or are you a B2C? If you're selling a B2B, because I'm just broadly classifying this basically, right? If you're B2B, and when I say B2B, that also includes B2 government or B2 whatever state or all that stuff. But if you are selling one, not to a directly end customers, you have to start thinking about certain amount of compliances because those people will not even deal with you if you don't have those compliances. I'll tell you a story where I'm trying to talk to this, it's a very popular company amongst developers, and I'm not going to name them, right? And we're trying to sell them, and the CTO came back and told me, look, I really like your stuff, but you know what? Suddenly we have a SOC 2 compliance, which we have to get done. Otherwise our business will not move forward. Now, this is a company which has been around for 4 or 5 years, extremely popular amongst developers everywhere, right? As I said, I'm not going to name it, but they're not SOC 2 compliant, and now it's coming and biting them because they're trying to win some large order, and they said, if you don't have SOC 2 compliance, don't come to us, right? So, you have to start thinking about, all sorts of policies. Abhijit mentioned, but, think about it, InfoSec policy, mobile device management policy, renewable media policy, incident management, encryption, DLP. If you want, just send me an email and I'll send you a list basically, okay? Now that's the B2B, right? Now, if you're B2C, then you have to think about, privacy, consumer data, PIR, GDPR, are you keeping it in where you are, who is accessing this? Because if somebody from Europe is accessing your website, with the new European laws, you need to make sure that that data remains local unless you're taking the data from them. So all those things have to be, addressed, In fact, I'm an indirect investor in a company which is just doing, basically security questionnaire automation. Okay, so they're not doing anything, but because this security questionnaire is 20-page long questionnaires and takes close to 14 days, 15 days for a person inside your company to do those questionnaires. And they're promising they'll do it within a day or so. So that gives you an idea of how much you have to do. So as a founder, I strongly entrepreneurs, I tell them you really have to start off security from day one, basically. Okay?
Yeah. Makes sense. So that is a great information for someone who is actually starting to build a company. Security is the first thing you should be considering. Now let's put things in perspective for people who are working in large organizations, right? Even within organization, it is a very important aspect. So Susmita, for you, if I'm a leader who is leading hundreds of employees who are geographically distributed, right, and working remotely, which has gone up a lot in last 1 year, how do you see the challenges in implementing security for them, and how does it look different from the startup world?
I think this is the big thing with the pandemic world. I don't know whether it's post-pandemic yet. Probably, it's clear from all of the materials we see that work from home, or rather work from anywhere, is sort of the new thing, is a trend that's here to stay. And whether you are a small business, a startup, or you're a scaled up, large organization, I think that you have to sort of support that trend. And I think from a security perspective, previously, imagine that you are the CISO or the IT and you had everything in control, sort of you had a firewall in place, you had your policies, you knew exactly what was in your, virtual or physical enterprise. And now you have these, diverse employees that are connecting from, around millions and billions of homes worldwide. And it just breaks security, a lot. I think part of the things that they have to think about is, educating the employees themselves. So when you and I connect from our homes, and most of the home networks are completely unmanaged. So I think that begin by, providing basic guidance to your employees that, it's, obviously you have, basic protection for the work device itself. It's a managed device for the most part. But, the work device is, and, your unmanaged devices, your phones, your tablets, if you are a QA engineer working from home, you have your RPI devices, you have your, different other things that you're connecting up to the home network. They're not managed. So from a IT perspective, trying to understand how to help those employees work from home, maybe you have to guide them that, you have to, start recommending, firewalls built into routers that are, enterprise grade firewalls. There are products out there in the market. They could be semi-expensive, try to sponsor them. Start talking about, virtual, sort of, splitting the home network into sort of an obvious work network versus a home network. I think a lot of people don't get it, but, if you have IoT devices or even kids working from their school laptops or tablets, because they're largely unmanaged, it's easy for the attacks to spread from one device on the home network over to your work devices, and from there to penetrate into sort of your larger network. So trying to kind of carve up a, siloed work network is a good idea. For a lot of the stuff that is online on the cloud, try to see there are a lot of like SASE based. So SASE is a big new trend also. That has taken a lot of traction. It helps by protecting your data seamlessly in one place, whether you're working from a branch office or at office or at home. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of products are out there. They're not completely cohesively integrated, but it begins by CISOs and IT starting to kind of boil it down and provide those products to the workforce working from anywhere.
Thank you. Makes sense. So Abhijit, you would like to add your thoughts on that? How does it look from finding that attack surface and being preventive about it? Right? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, for security leaders of organizations that have hundreds of employees, right? I mean, it's a very large surface that they are trying to protect, right? They're trying to protect their employees, their products, their critical data, right? So something that becomes important is that you have to think in terms of defense in depth, right? So you need to do all of that. At the same time, you have to kind of bring in a mindset that, these preventive controls may not be sufficient, right? And that's very evident in all the breaches that happen today, right? With all the controls in place, attackers do get in. And at that point, it's all about an assume breach mindset, right? So the zero trust model that Pravin was mentioned, right? So assume breach is an important concept, which basically means that you have to assume that an attacker is there, and then what do you do to find something like that, right? So it's all about active monitoring. You have to look for your vulnerabilities. You have to look for your misconfigurations. These are dynamic environments where things are changing all the time. And you have to look for solutions which can detect and respond to such threats as soon as possible. So you have to actively look for threats around your critical infrastructure. So that's a mindset that the industry and the operators are going heavily towards.
Makes sense. So Pravin, a question to you. So we add so many security tools and services. On the other side, it does affect productivity of employees as well. So how do you think we can address that part today? How do we make security as a useful tool and not as a barrier to productivity?
So Nidhi, one thing which security industry has been forced to, rethink how they do security. And I don't know how many of you attended this morning's Jay's keynote. He made it very clear that they had to rethink the architecture. Right? So let's understand that for a minute. To your point, Nidhi, is security creating friction is the question, right? And I'm going to say here today that to some extent, security, that friction has been really reduced to now. Yes, you may be forced to do let's say, multi-factor authorization, couple of things to enter a system. But once you are in there, it's almost seamless to you, right? We've removed, lots of those friction points. The security industry has been forced to do it. And I think to some extent that has happened for, two reasons. One is, enterprises themselves had to, they have realized, they have all these workers remote, right, working from home, and, they have a huge cybersecurity liability. So they have invested a lot of money to, figure out how to remove this, the friction points. The second thing which has happened, which is, I don't know whether you realize it, but it's a boon to the industry, is the three largest cloud providers, which is Amazon, AWS, Azure, and Google. All three are also the security leaders. They have more people in their security than most security companies out there in the world, right? Microsoft obviously is very well known for its security. Google, in fact, Google's the VP of, Eric Gross, who ran the security, is a technical advisor to us. I've been working with her 4 or 5 years. They were attacked by China back in 2007-8, and so they've had a huge, army of people doing security, and so does AWS. So what that has done is they have done a model where all these friction points are removed. So I think in today's day and age, if any employee came to you and said, hey, this is creating friction, I think you need to just look for the right solution. There are solutions available which removes that friction basically. Okay?
That's great. So at this point, I see there are few questions in the chat as well. Let me read it one for you. Is it difficult to enter in security domain and make something which seems mostly come from experience of vulnerabilities?
Yes, let me address that actually, because I'm in the business of vulnerability, especially application and software vulnerabilities, right? Basically, it is not at all difficult, as I said, to enter the domain, because beyond vulnerabilities, now there is a lot more going on. So yes, the attacks happen because somebody's trying to take advantage of some vulnerability, but now the attack surface is increased, where it is just no more vulnerability. There are other ways people are entering as well. So for example, credential theft is nothing to do with vulnerability. It is purely happening because you have phishing email coming, you click on it, and you basically give your credential to somebody because, they send you an email saying your social security number is going to be removed. So you just type your, social security login password, all that stuff. So, things like that, right? So there is a credential theft, which people do. So there are many other ways you can enter the security domain. There's another area where actually security had nothing to do with vulnerability, but has done extremely well, is the automation part. Nidhi, you mentioned about friction, right? There is lots of automation going on in areas like AI to understand, you get all these, incidents. How do I make sense out of it? How do you do, threat modeling of this? This is all machine learning AI after you got the data, right? Which is like any other AI problem. You're taking a large set of data, whether it's a vulnerability data, incident data, and you're just converting that into a model where it can be fast acted upon. So there are many other areas in security where you can help. You can enter the domain, even if you don't understand the vulnerabilities.
Makes sense. Abhijit, I believe
I'd like to add something to that. Security, when you are providing solutions, around this space, it is quite a bit of a technical space. I would say, not necessarily you have to understand every CV, every particular vulnerability, because there's tons of them. It can get quite maddening actually. But I think you have to think about the solution space a little bit differently. Today, there is machine learning and AI options available to sort of not just the hackers. They're obviously, doing all of that. But now you think about, okay, the vulnerability is there, but okay, fine, your printer was hacked. But how does that demonstrate as a change of behavior of that particular infected equipment or a malicious user? So I think about solutions. When you're entering the space, you enter with a different approach than what has been there. And I think that with the new age solutions, the demand for AI, machine learning, because data is available quite easily, well, sort of. And then I think if you think of it from that perspective, you can really sort of build algorithms that can detect, as Abhijit was mentioning, when a threat is sitting in the network for a long time, and then suddenly it surfaces, being able to connect that dots, of when it penetrated to what it did do and all of that. I mean, can you use newer techniques to do that? You don't need to know what vulnerability caused the threat, caused the attack to come into the, home or whichever network it is. It's now that you have to detect it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit, I think, the solutions need to be smarter and new age.
Yeah, I think one way to look at it is that it is a constantly evolving space, right? It's a cat and mouse game, right? So the attackers are employing new techniques. The defenders have to catch up, or defenders have to just go way ahead so that it creates a barrier, right? So which means that you have to look at data in new ways. You have to employ new techniques. There you have to find common patterns that of attack techniques that need to be addressed. So there is a lot of innovation that is possible, and it's mainly because it's a human to human warfare, right? So you're just coming up with new techniques all the time, and that happens on both sides.
And in fact, I'll add one more point to both Abhijit and Susmita said here is, imagine, let's fast forward, because we always try to do something new we are trying to, 10 years from now, assuming we have autonomous driving, and there is a vulnerability in the software. The car is going at 80 miles an hour, and now somebody can penetrate the car. To Susmita's point, right? What is going to happen next? Okay, you found the vulnerability, but what is going to happen to next? What is the behavior the car is going to demonstrate after it's been penetrated? And this is where the weaponization comes in. And this is where, you could have another counterbalancing software which would figure out, hey, this cannot be allowed, right? It will not allow the car to do certain things. It cannot be converted into a weapon, and all that needs to. So there are lots of areas where you could come in and help, even if you didn't understand the vulnerability.
You keep things in your control even if you get impacted. There's one more question which I'd like Susmita, you to address, and others can add thought as well. What are the commercial options for security and privacy for smart homes and IoT devices?
So there's a few. I mean, there's a fair number of options out there, and I think that more is probably required. So when you think about IoT devices themselves, now governments are coming in and they're adding more regulations for device vendors to be compliant and to make sure that they have the right security built in as a design, because these IoT devices often are very, very small, from a cost perspective, the margin perspective. So, but it kind of like now with the government intervening, at least in different countries, it's happening. So, but if you're an IoT device vendor and you're looking for commercial options to, how do I bring, security into my device? There are, a few different vendors playing in the space. There's also like certification vendors who you can reach out to if you're one of those players, and you can get sort of like, that seal of trust, if you may, that yes, you have that built in. It'll actually help you go a long way in terms of selling itself. And then in terms of like, smart home, if you think about the smart home, there's a few different commercial options available to, let's say, the users. One is that they can buy device software. Like that's where, traditionally you have the security companies selling device software, for your, personal devices primarily. But that doesn't take care of the IoT devices. So you can also look for network security solutions. And a lot of the stuff here, when you look at like which other vendors were providing it, there are independent third-party vendors like Google offers, Amazon offers like Eero, etc. Plume obviously offers in that space. But if you think about like, who does the user hold responsible for securing the home network? I think that the carriers, are being held responsible. So if you look for your own carriers, like if you have AT&T or Comcast or Charter, whoever is your network carrier in your home, you can also look for commercial options from them. And you can, if you are a vendor who's looking to kind of add more, defense and depth to those existing solutions, then you could market yourself through either the D2C or through the carrier channel and find your way to the end users.
Makes sense. So at this time, from audience perspective, there are employees, there are business leaders, there are next product builders, founders. So Abhijit, what would be your key takeaway for all the audience today, that how do you put security at the center of their work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we already talked about the implications in terms of protection, right? That why it is important to adopt new technologies, new ways, new practices and new mindsets to protect your assets. One thing I wanted to add here is the implication from a business enablement point of view, and that kind of ties a little bit with the friction issue that we talked about, right? So and lot of folks in the audience will recognize that from an application development point of view, security is considered a roadblock, right? That the security guys are coming and saying, no, don't do it. So the most exciting thing, I think, from my point of view, is that how it can enable business success, right? So if security is tied in earlier with that development cycle, it makes things efficient. It enables the business to come out with the developers to come out with the features rather than worry about security, to get to revenue quickly. So the point of view about security, not just as a protection, but also as something that enables business success, that is an important point of view. And I think, that is something that is more pervasively will be something that everybody will experience. And it is not just about compliance and making sure that you are not getting breached, but it's also when you adopt the right practices and right technologies, you have a competitive advantage. Right, so that would be the thought that I would like to share with everyone.
That's great. Security is not a barrier; it is an accelerator. Pravin, what would you like to be the key takeaway for our audience today?
Yeah, so the key takeaways is, as I mentioned beginning of my talk, right? $10 billion of venture money is going in security every year. This is in addition to the amount of innovation being happening in all the security companies, worldwide, public companies and everything. So what has happened now is the security has really become easy to adapt. It's you just have to follow the hygiene, the guideline. So, and it affects everybody. So everybody has to take, as Susmita mentioned, if you're living in a home, your home is now digitally very well connected. You have to protect your identity. You have to do some things there. If you're working in office, you have to do certain things there. So for example, right, let's say, many of the people who are on this, who are listening to this, maybe are developers, right? There are so many easy guidelines available for developers to write secure code. Right? There are companies, there are lots of videos, everything, right? And it doesn't take that long. And then after writing, there are lots of tools available to check whether it was written right or not, right? So the vulnerability we discussed will not even enter. And if you can stop it in its heels, right? If there are no vulnerabilities in your code, in your network, then the attackers have a much harder time to get in. Right? Comes credential theft, phishing, email. So many videos are available, so many training happens. Now, in fact, I don't know, but most large companies have now mandatory security hour training, right? Where you have to go through, which tells you, even though you may not be writing code, they tell you don't click on emails which you don't understand where it came from and all those things. So there is so much stuff available. Just embrace it. There is no reason to fear it. Right now people worry about cyber attacks and this thing, fear it and do not embrace it, and it becomes a little too late. So just embrace it from day one in your life, whether it's at your home or it's your office, and you have lots of tools available to make your life simpler and easier, basically.
Makes sense. So Smita, what would be your key takeaway for our audience?
I think one of the key things I think I want to leave the audience with is security. Cybersecurity is for real, right? It's not a myth that it's something will probably happen. It is gonna happen because the attack surfaces are way too many. It's very complex. We're too intertwined, interconnected. And when I think about consumers, my worry with all of us is we don't take cybersecurity seriously because we feel like, oh, that phishing attack is for the enterprise, that ransomware attack is for the, for the defense sector or for that financial sector. It's not for me. I think that, that myth has to be busted. And also try to not just acknowledge that for yourself, not because you are the adult, you're the CISO of the home, but inculcate those practices among the, early into your kids, because they are actually probably getting very savvy, cyber players already. They're all into the devices. So that's one key takeaway. The second, I would say, the solutions out here are, it's happening right now. The solutions are not, yesterday's solutions are not going to work for the next 5 or 10 years. So it's a very, very innovative, industry right now. So we are looking for hot talent everywhere to come in and think outside the box, because the hackers are. And so, this is a very good space to be in. I think that's the main message for my audience here.
That is great. I think we put a lot of thoughts and perspective here. Any more ending thought anyone would like to add? Abhijit or Pravin? Okay, that's great. So I think we did put the whole security in perspective for the folks who are founders, who are investors, who are employees, who are using devices in home, and even paying attention to our kids, that what they're doing today and what they should not be, and how we're putting security at the center of that for that. So that is the end of the panel today. Thank you so much, Abhijit. Thank you, Pravin. Thank you, Susmita, for coming here and sharing your thoughts. It was great talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to all our panelists. Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you.
It was very nice.